Hi, Chris.
All right, so I started recording. So good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining once again. We hope that this session is going to be enlightening as well. And we hope that you're going to learn one or two. And please do not let us forget about the project that we drew in. Omola and the coordinating, she's the assistant coordinator of this alumni.
I want you to carry the plate.
She's going to be coordinating the particular. She's going to be coordinating.
You okay? Okay. I spoke to Amy. She said she will do that tomorrow.
So that we can see how the
hello, sorry to interrupt you. We can't hear you clearly. The audio is muffled.
Thank you volunteering to do this. Thank you very much. So Millicent, I'm going to be the host now.
We're traveling 125 miles on the coast to the heart of the At first, the landscape is filled with log forest.
Okay, thank you very much. But we couldn't hear you clearly. It was muffled actually. I don't know if I was the only one having that issue, but thank you very much. Hello everybody, good evening. My name is Millicent and I am your...
Very low. Is it my, okay, maybe it's my volume or maybe it's my volume.
Guys, am I loud enough? Please let me know.
I think you're high, so my volume is fine.
Oh, yes, okay.
So all right, thank you.
All right, thank you guys. So good evening, everybody. My name is Millicent Umeh, and I'll be taking the session for today. Let me go ahead to share my screen. Let me see. Okay, confirm if you can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right. So we're going to be having, or we're going to learn business analysis techniques today. So in the BA field, and at least to the best of my knowledge, according to the BABOK, we have several techniques. I think there are over 50, if I am correct. But today I just picked, a few, due to time constraints and everything. So this would be our objectives for today. First of all, we're going to know what business analysis techniques are. We're going to know some of these techniques like the focus groups, functional decomposition, glossary, interface analysis, interviews, item tracking, lessons learned or retrospective, and then acceptance criteria. I actually added acceptance criteria at the end. It is a technique, right? And I know someone else is going to also handle it, but I don't know. I just felt like adding that one technique. It was a last minute thing anyways. So we're going to start with the definition of business analysis techniques. So business analysis techniques are basically set of methods that we use to identify.
Suggestion, I'm just saying that number two. In this meeting, be able to outline what we're expected to look for by tomorrow. Start tomorrow, some people will come with a draft. Because if we don't give an outline of what we're expected to come with tomorrow, we're still going to be arguing, and this meeting is still going to be as right as it is. So I think it would be nice if we have an outline of what our expectations should be. But, okay, if you're picking this SDG, number one, why do you want us to work on this SDG? Number, how does this SDG also help to improve the economy? Because SDG is able to improve the economy of the nation, of global economy.
Is this what is going on? Was the person referring to
What's
me?
going on?
I got confused for a second. What's happening? Can everybody please mute themselves for a moment? For a while, I thought the person was referring to me. I had to hear economy, and then I was like, okay, it's not me. So we're going to know what business analysis techniques are. Sorry for the break in transmission. So business analysis techniques are basically set of methods that we BAs use to identify, analyze, and solve business problems. Most times during a project, it can be opportune to use several techniques. You are not limited to the amount of techniques you can use per project, right? And these techniques are used by us to understand the needs and the goals of an organization. We can also use these techniques to identify areas of improvement and develop strategies to achieve these things. So by using these techniques, we can help organizations make informed decisions and improve their operations, which can eventually lead to increased efficiency, profitability, and customer satisfaction. I think if anyone or if everybody should agree with me, we both know that customer satisfaction should be our focal point when it comes to business, because without the customers, I don't think we are doing anything, right? They're basically our bosses anyways, if we look at it from a certain point of view. So we're going to talk about focus groups. I picked this one because it's particularly interesting. I do like focus groups actually. The focus group is one of the techniques used by business analysts. So with a focus group, we get to gather and elicit ideas and opinions in an interactive environment. Most times we get to confuse focus groups with brainstorming because they're quite similar, right? But when you get to compare the processes for focus groups and the brainstorming technique, you'll be able to see a distinctive difference because focus groups are more structured, I think, right? So in focus groups, we have pre-qualified participants whose objective and goal is to discuss and make comments on a particular topic within a context, right? And the sole aim of a focus group is to get to know and document the participant's perspective. And it's more like a qualitative research, right? So with the focus group, we would have to have a moderator, we will have to have a recorder or a scribe. And the beautiful thing about the focus group is the fact that it can be carried out at any point in the project. You could carry it out maybe in the beginning, right, in the initiation of a project, or even towards the release, right, or anywhere in between. So the structure of focus groups actually make it different from brainstorming, because in some settings, we can have the business analyst as the moderator, or we could have someone else. And with focus groups, you get to bring in people like, you can see people like certain SMEs, subject matter experts, right? They have knowledge on a particular discussion, and it can be conducted as an interview sometimes by some people. You get to see people making the mistake of making focus group look like an interview. So you're having maybe open-ended questions or, straight questions. That's not how the focus groups should be conducted. Focus groups are like, they're discussion-based, right? And then feedback will be collected on that particular topic you are going to be talking about. Most times, after it is conducted, the results will be documented and it shall be presented to the stakeholders. Then I would give an example. I decided to use an e-commerce for this one. So we have, in this context, an enterprise wants to include its own delivery service for its e-commerce business due to, constant disappointments from delivery companies, right? And then this delivery service will cater solely to their customers to improve customer satisfaction. Now we will be asked to conduct a focus group to discuss this feature. Now, for more context, let me say you run your own business, for example, and you don't have your own delivery company. I'm sure most people who have, probably run businesses, small businesses at least, to the best of my knowledge, they know how frustrating delivery people are, right? The riders may be coming from disappointments, or maybe they damage your goods and everything. So it can be quite frustrating. And if you get to keep having maybe bad reviews based on the delivery service of your product, I think your business will go downhill at some point, right? So how are we going to conduct this focus group? Now, first of all, we need to have a focus group objective, right? We need to have a defined purpose for the focus group. And then we need to have a focus group plan to ensure that all the stakeholders are aware of this focus group we are having, and they are aware of the expected outcome. We also need to ensure that they all agree on it, and the focus group session you are conducting actually meets the objectives. So in the focus group plan, there are like certain activities. You have to plan, you have to know the purpose for the focus group. You have to know the location, right? When you're talking about location, is it going to be maybe physical, or will we have it virtually? You need to know the participants, right? Where would these participants be, like the demographics, right? Some might be physical, some might be virtual, maybe due to certain reasons. Will you give incentives for these focus groups? Maybe, are you going to maybe get external people, for example, to talk about these things, and then maybe you pay them for their time, per se? Who will be our moderator? Who will be the recorder, right? Then you have to think about the budgets, you have to think about the timeline and the outcomes, right? Now, the moderator and recorder should be assigned to two different people who happen to be knowledgeable about the topic, and they should be skilled enough to keep the session on track. Once all these things are in place, we can now begin the focus group session, right? And it should last for at least 1 to 2 hours, right? The focus group typically has 6 to 12 attendees. You would need a discussion guide with a prepared script of specific questions, framework or structure, and the topics to aid the moderator, right? So the results of the focus group will now be transcribed after it's done as soon as possible. You need to transcribe the results as soon as the session has ended, and the BA will get to analyze and document the agreements of the participants. You would also document the disagreements too. Look out for certain trends in their responses. Maybe if everybody says, okay, I go ahead with this particular idea, I prefer this idea to this one, right? So look for trends in responses, and then you get to create reports that will summarize these results. Can someone, I don't know, is it possible for us to automatically mute some people? Right. So focus groups are really okay. Teniola, you raised the hand.
Hi, sorry, I have a question.
Yes.
Okay,
please.
so can you explain a focus group in terms of like in a real life scenario for a BA? Like how does a BA go about, setting up a focus group? Like, is it a BA that is meant to be the one to set it up? Especially like,
Um,
'cause, like we don't have an experience in that. So like that's why I want to know, like what's like a real life experience for a BA when it comes to setting up a focus group.
okay, so
Thank you.
um okay. So first of all, as a BA, if you are being assigned to conduct a focus group, right? Um, I'm sure you know sometimes as BAs too, we get to conduct workshops, right? So it's quite similar, but it's not the same since we have less people there, like just 6 to 12 people in attendance. You get to plan it out, right? So you have to maybe meet with your project manager or whoever is also in charge of that particular project, and you get to draft out the objective for that focus group, right? And then when it comes to planning it, like I said, you need to note the purpose of the focus group. Why are we conducting this particular focus group, right? You need to also prepare the location. Say maybe you guys decide to like use a hall or something, you get to note the availability of the hall, maybe the pricing and everything. There are lots of, back and forth, right? Then you have to identify the people that will be in that focus group. Okay, you get to know if, okay, maybe this person who is an expert when it comes to maybe business management, right? If this particular person will be here, or maybe someone who is an expert when it comes to the delivery system, right? If you just need to note every person that would be part of that focus group, you have to know their locations, right? Know their availability, right? Will this person be available for this focus group? The time I'm setting this focus group, will it be convenient for everybody? All right. You also need to know who the moderator would be. You could be the moderator, maybe, if you are skilled in a particular field, but if you're not, it is fine. The BA mustn't be the moderator for a focus group. All right. So you get to arrange all these things, note the budget for this focus group, because if it's something that you have to maybe do in a hall, right? Or maybe say a boardroom, obviously you need to note that certain refreshments needs to be there, right? So you plan everything is planned down to the letter. That is why it is way different from a brainstorming session, right? Once you've noted all these things, right, you now get to begin the focus group. So there'll be a guide. You can either work on preparing the guide yourself or you get help, right? There is no harm in asking questions, especially if you are not so familiar with how to conduct it, right? So once it's all done, it's just typically, it's similar to how you get to elicit information from stakeholders, right? So as this focus group is going on, maybe you're not the moderator, quite all right, but still you need to take down things that are being said in the focus group and then you document it, right? And then you present it to the stakeholders. So does that answer your question, Teniola? Hello, is she there?
Oh, sorry, I didn't know I didn't unmute myself. Yes, it did. Thank you so much.
All right. So focus groups are quite important because of the valuable insights they provide when it comes to looking at your customers' needs and their preferences, right? So it's more like, I like to say business analysts should be customer centric, and they should also focus on providing human-centered solutions, right? So how would I improve my customers' need? The pain point right now for this particular company is the delivery service. It is poor, right? It is bad, and they need to improve it. So hence the focus group, right? So excuse me. The next technique would be functional decomposition. Honestly, when I first heard of functional decomposition, it was quite confusing to me because it seemed like a whole lot of, I don't know, forgive me, jargons, right? So, but with functional decomposition, right, we get to manage complexity, right, and reduce uncertainty by breaking down processes, systems, functional areas or deliverables into simpler parts, right? And then you get to analyze each of these parts independently. So when you get to break things down, right, it makes things easier generally, right? And this is the main point of, this is what we aim to achieve with functional decomposition. It's just like, say, for example, you're looking for, okay, so with functional decomposition, for example, right, let's look at it this way. Let's say we have a car, right? And when we look at the car generally, we can see that the car has various functions, right? And we have several parts that make up a particular function in the car. Now, if we get to break it down to various parts, right? You could have your steering, you could have the side mirrors, you could talk about the tires, the rims, the exhaust, you know, like these are like separate components, right? So say maybe you want to align it with function decomposition. This is just how it is. Something is broad, it's complex. If you get to look at a car fully the way it is, you might not necessarily understand how each part works until maybe you break it down into sections, right? So say there's an issue with the car, right? You can get to break it down and check different components individually to find out the issue with that car, right? Sometimes even the sub-component, like even the components could be broken down into sub-components, right? So that is how function decomposition is. Now, I'm also going to align it with the e-commerce business, right? So say you want to break it down, right, using functional decomposition, right? Note that the delivery service they want to offer right now, they will now like to see it as a standalone company. What does it mean? So apart from delivering our own products, say we also want to be able to take external deliveries, right? Just maybe the way GIG is functioning or DHL, for example, right? So how do you get to carry out this functional decomposition now, right? First things first, as always, you always need to have an objective. Why am I carrying out this functional decomposition, right? So you have an objective to drive the process, and then you get to define what you're decomposing. You get to know how to decompose it and how deep, right? Now, you now need to know maybe your subjects of decomposition, right? It could be maybe a business unit, it could be maybe business outcomes, decisions, or maybe a particular feature, right? Once you have noted these subjects of decomposition, the next thing you have to do now is to understand the level of decomposition. How small will you break down this component? Let's use our previous idea of the car, right? Say you're looking at the engine, right? How low will you, or how deep will you get to decompose it? Will you break down various parts of the engine down to the wires, right? Or maybe you would stop at other components, like maybe, let's say, I don't drive anyways, but I'm just making a guess, right? Let's say we have the radiator, if I'm correct, right? We have the fuel pump, right? So say you get to like, how deep am I going to analyze this thing? That is it. So you need to know why, you need to know where and when to stop decomposing a particular thing in order to meet your need, right? In the example of this delivery service, right, we could break down the e-commerce websites, for example, and maybe their processes down to maybe components relating to a shopping cart, right? And since before we were using a different delivery company, right, we need to understand each of the processes that were involved when we were using maybe an off-the-shelf solution, right? So for example, too, maybe with an e-commerce website, you could say, okay, function decomposition would be breaking it down to maybe searching for products, maybe browsing for products, right? Adding products to carts, right? The checkout process, the payment process, order confirmation, order tracking, maybe customer support. It could even be as low as maybe your billing address. Okay, will this person use the same billing address as before, or will the person change it? Right? Look at, okay, maybe incorporating or looking at things like maybe discounts, coupons, etc. Right? So the results of the function decomposition can be applied in the execution of other tasks like the future states, right? So after you decompose them into smaller components and subcomponents, you now need to validate and verify these results. And you can represent these function decomposition with diagrams like the use case, right? And flowcharts, basically. So we have the glossary next. Glossary, for me, the first time I knew about glossary was when I was reading the book. Glossary is quite popular when it comes to like books or novels, right? It's where you get to like go towards the ending of a book and you see certain words that were used in the book, right, with their meaning, right? But in this particular context, right, the glossary defines the key terms that are relevant to a particular business domain, right? Glossaries are basically used to provide a common understanding of certain terms used by stakeholders. Most times, a word can have different meanings, right, in different fields. For example, now we could have the acronym now BA. I know how many people I have told I am a BA and they ask me, what is that, right? And I now have to like say it's business analysis. I mean, they'll still ask me what is business analysis anyways, but at least, right? I was able to tell them it's not business administration, right? So BA could be anything, right? So you just have to like define that keyword, right? So if we're in a business environment and maybe the BA acronym is used, right, we would have several assumptions, right? And this is where the glossary literally comes to our aid. But we also need to know why a particular term was included in the glossary. The term could be included when maybe that term is unique to a particular domain, right? When there are various definitions for that term, using the BA, like I stated as an example, right? And then the definition implied is probably outside of the term's common use, or when maybe there's a reasonable chance of misunderstanding. That is when we use a glossary. When you're creating a glossary, note, it could also be your task, it could not be your task. But in case you are asked to create a glossary, right, there are things you need to do. You need to identify who will be responsible for the maintenance and distribution of the glossary you're about to create, right? One other thing, you also need to know that the glossary needs to be updated, right? The glossary has to be updated regularly, has to be maintained eventually, right? So the definitions that are outlined in the glossary need to be clear, it needs to be concise and brief. Acronyms have to be spelled out if used in a definition, right? And the stakeholders should have easy and reliable access to this glossary. The editing of a glossary should be limited to a specific stakeholder, right? Or maybe a particular person. So maybe you need to know that, okay, Bisola, for example, is in charge of editing this glossary. No other person edits this glossary except Bisola, so that we'll not have confusion, right? And say maybe Bisola is leaving the company, for example. Bisola happens to hand over to someone else. She now gets to tell this person, okay, this is how this thing was done. These are the various things I did, and this is where you continue from, right? So I think this is also one of the reasons why you get to give, I think, a week or two notice or something before you leave a company, right? So you can help, in the transitioning state or something. At least to the best of my knowledge, I think that's how it should be done properly. So these are the things to note when you're creating a glossary. Interface analysis. I want to even say something small before I go ahead with interface analysis. You won't believe that I didn't get a particular role last year when I actually asked for feedback eventually, anyways, after the interviews. I didn't get a particular role last year. It was a remote role, right? The company is a good company, and they didn't mind my location, right? Because they had people from Nigeria to work in for them. In this particular company, they told me if you're working, you'd start by 10 a.m. Nigerian time and you end by 6 p.m. For me, that was a very good one because I mean, I can get my beauty sleep, right? And the pay was also like in the beginning, right? They had to outline, the budget they have for that role actually. So funny enough, we got to talk about the money before we even had the main interview. Right?
For you, they work together. I don't know. 11, I pack me. I don't know.
So
please.
No.
Hi, Ngozi Wago. Please, can you put your device on mute?
right. So so guys, so basically I passed the first interview. It was 60 minutes. The second interview was 60 minutes too. That particular interview, they had to know about my background as a BA and everything. Now, the very last interview was with the team lead, right? So I think that's where you get to know if you're probably going to fit in with the team and everything. Why I'm saying this, it's so embarrassing that the main reason I didn't get that role was because I didn't know what an API was. I had no idea. When I took the BA course in January last year, believe me, I was new to the tech world. I didn't even really know, as embarrassing as it is, I didn't even know how to use a system properly. I learned everything, and thanks to Petrina actually, because she did send links for how to use PowerPoint, how to use Microsoft Word, everything, right? So that was when I learned all that. So I didn't know what an API was, and I missed a 5-figure job. After that interview, I didn't know that was the reason. I passed everything well. I did user story on the spot with acceptance criteria, but just the fact that I didn't know certain technical terms, and they build custom applications for companies, right? Or whoever their customers are. I just didn't know that, right? So why am I talking about this? Interface analysis. An example of an interface analysis is maybe an API, right? That is why I decided to talk about this. So we need to also note that learning doesn't just stop after our courses. We need to constantly be updated, read as much as you can. Till tomorrow, I wouldn't forget that experience. So let's go over to this interface analysis, right? It is basically a technique that we use to identify where, what, why, when, and how, and for whom information is exchanged between solution components or across the solution boundary, right? Let's assume you need to access a piece of information now, and you want to make a search on Google, for example. You'd obviously need a phone or a system, right? So now this means that the interface connecting you to the solution that you are looking for is your device, Google, and then the websites that Google will probably, pop up when you type in, a question or anything, right? That's the possible, solution to your query, right? So an interface is basically a connection between two components or solutions. Sometimes most solutions need one or more interfaces to exchange information with other business processes, solution components, or organizational units. Most solutions might need various components, right? Various interfaces, right? And we have various interface types. Some of them are user interfaces, right? This also includes human users directly interacting with the solution. We have people who are external to the solution, such as stakeholders, business processes, data interfaces between systems, APIs, there's application programming interfaces, hardware devices. These are all interfaces, right? So the interface analysis technique can aid us as business analysts in eliciting more detailed stakeholder requirements, right? Thereby giving us adequate functional coverage of the solution so that we can be able to meet stakeholder needs. I think if this particular, technique can help you in having a detailed or more adequate functional coverage of your solution, I think it would also be advisable for you to use this early. So you can also note which stakeholder or person you'll get to benefit from or develop or maybe depend on the said interface or interfaces for, right? So it can help you also in identifying your stakeholders, and you might need this for other elicitation techniques. So how can we conduct an interface analysis? You need to prepare for identification of the interface. What interface exactly am I looking at, right? When you're doing this, you need to take advantage of other techniques to aid your identification of this interface. Techniques like maybe the observation, document analysis, interviews, they can all be of help. Like I said in the beginning, you're not limited to just one technique. You can use as much as possible, as far as you'd be able to get the solution you're looking for, right? You would also need to know you have to conduct the interface identification as a BA. You need to know the differences, the different interfaces that you would need in your future states, right? You have to describe the function of that interface. You have to know the frequency, right, of this interface usage. How often would we use this interface, right? What type of interface would be appropriate for our solution, right? And you need to get like the initial details about this particular interface. Once you're done identifying your interface or the interface needed, you have to define it, right? So that means you have to focus primarily on describing the inputs to the interface and the inputs from the interface, right? So there are questions you need to ask, questions like, who would use this interface, right? What information is passed over this interface and where does this interface take place? So you always need to remember that you have to conduct an in-depth analysis of any interface at all. Now, interviews. Interviews happen to be the most common technique, right? And I know that almost everybody here must have experienced some sort of interview or another, right? But when I was reading up on interviews, I got to realize that interviews actually have a process, right? We have structured and unstructured interviews. So the structured interview would look like a typical question and answer session, right? For the unstructured one, the interviewer does not have a predefined set of questions, right? So it's not the typical question and answer stuff. The questions would literally vary based on the responses gotten from the interviewee's answers, right? And maybe their interactions. So as simple as this technique may seem, we need to note that it does have some planning involved from before the interview to the interview itself, and then after the interview. How to conduct your interview. First, you need to plan your interview by noting or writing down the overall purpose of your interview based on maybe the business need or the individual goals for that interview. You have to do this for various interviews, right? That's if you have more than one interview. You need to express the goals for that your interview, and you need to clearly communicate it with each interviewee. You need to note who your potential interviewees are, right? And this could be done through stakeholder identification and planned stakeholder engagement, right? So this is where you get to know each of them and who would happen to benefit more from the solution. You need to know what they see as value. You need to know their interests. You have to know their goals, And after you must have identified your potential interviewees, you need to prepare your interview questions, right? So these questions are basically designed according to the goals of your interview. some of these goals could be maybe collecting data, it could be researching stakeholders' view of maybe this particular solution, you know. I would advise you to use both open-ended questions and closed questions, right? That's both the yes and no, and maybe that's the structured and unstructured, right? So you don't do the typical yes and no. You can also go ahead with maybe whatever response they give you. So the question could be from general to specific, it could be detailed, it could be just maybe from start to finish. It depends, right? And sometimes you might have to customize your questions when the purpose of your interview is unique to the perspective of that particular person you're interviewing. So after you've noted the questions for the interview, you need to take care of the logistics for that interview. When we're talking about logistics, we're talking about location, right? Where is the location of this person you're interviewing? How available is this person, right? What would be your mode of communication? Are you going to record this particular interview or not, right? These are basically just one of the few things you need to note, right? And after you've taken care of this, you need to now know the interview flow, right? So when you're opening, sorry, excuse me. When you're opening the interview, right, there's some things to say. You could like maybe start with describing the purpose of this interview. You can also confirm.
The whole break, guys, well.
Please, who is talking? Hello.
My three, her break was 3 p.m.
As they float our body in Lancaster. I'm serious. It's as if
iPhone and Yomi Fair, please move. So
Okay.
Hi, Millicent.
Hi, hello. So can I go on?
All right, yes. You are the host. You should try to see if you can mute people.
Let me see.
But I think they hold it now.
Let me see, mute all. Okay.
Yes, please just mute all.
Don't wait. Okay, yeah, I would allow participants to mute themselves. All right. Okay, I think that's
Yeah,
settled.
you can just mute everyone. So what I did was that I had to take charge again and mute everyone. But I made you the host back. But if you can mute people from your hand, that would be nice.
All right, I think I have muted everybody, but I allowed them to unmute in case anybody has, maybe a question or something. All right, so let me share my screen again. Okay, so I was talking about the flow of the interview, right? So when you're opening the interview, I talked about describing the purpose of that interview. You have to confirm the role that this person you're interviewing plays in that particular interview. During that interview, you need to focus on the established goals and maybe predefined questions if you actually have any for that particular person. You have to manage the concerns raised by them. So it's either you have answers to those things or maybe you get to document them, right? And follow up with it eventually. When you're closing your interview, you now have to ask this person you're interviewing for areas that might have been overlooked, in that particular session. You also need to provide a point of contact for these people to follow up with maybe additional information. and you have to summarize that session, outline the process for how the information gathered will be used, thank them for your time, and then eventually, of course, you still have to follow up with them, right? And that will also be good so that you'll be able to organize and confirm the results as soon as you can, right? So you're sure that this is exactly what this person said, right? So I think that's also where the validation and verification comes in business analysis. I don't know if I'm wrong, but I think that's it too. So you also need to do that with an interview. Item tracking. This particular technique is actually used to capture and assign responsibility for issues and stakeholder concerns that could probably have an impact on the solution you intend on providing. With the item tracking technique, stakeholders might maybe identify certain types, such as maybe actions, assumptions, constraints, it depends, right? And when a stakeholder happens to raise this issue, right, you need to assess it to determine if it's going to be viable. And if that particular concern is viable, you will now classify it as a specified item type, right? So it can be tracked and controlled by a process that works towards the item's closure, right? So most times during the life cycle, an item can be assigned to one or more stakeholders who happen to be responsible for the solution. So for example, now, let's say we're having a project, right? And certain concerns were raised. You are now given the task as a business analyst to track these issues and concerns, manage their impact, or ensure that, okay, eventually this thing is closed. Say maybe a bug, for example, say maybe a bug was identified and something, you need to ensure that, okay, the person working on fixing this bug eventually fixes it, right? So you have to record each of those items, right? Each of the items that have been raised, those concerns. Jira could be used for doing that. I think Jira is very good for it. Either you maybe use a software like Jira, or maybe you do it manually, right? You could have an item identifier. You have to summarize that item, write a summary of that item. It has to have a category, it has to have a type, right? When we're talking of type, remember, we're talking of like assumptions or constraints, dependencies, defects, enhancements. Those are types, right? You have to note the date it was identified. You have to also note the impact of that particular issue on the project. Who identified this particular issue? And what is the priority of this item? Is it low, is it medium, or is it high? So you have to also include a date for the resolution and the owner of that particular item, right? So when you're talking about the owner, you're talking about the stakeholder who is assigned to manage that item from its opening to closure. Who actually would resolve this issue? What strategy have we agreed on, right, to be able to work on this particular issue? What is the status update of that particular item? Look at it from maybe the resolution update, and maybe would we have to escalate this problem at some point? You have to like take note of these things, right? And you're doing all this so that you make sure that one item effort does not become duplicated. So the output of this will determine how well the stakeholders probably resolved the items using proper resources, right? So that is basically how item tracking goes. So you have to note, okay, we have a particular problem. Who identified this problem? When was this problem identified? It's like structured, right? And you also need to follow up to make sure that the date that was assigned for the closure of this item, right, was met. So you don't get to have a bug that hasn't been fixed for 2 weeks running, and maybe your app is supposed to launch maybe in a few days, right? It's not nice. We need to ensure that each items have been taken care of, right? So we have lessons learned. If you're basically familiar with agile ceremonies, I'm sure we would have heard of projects, or I think sprint retrospective, right? Where you have questions like What did we do well? What did we not do well? What can we do to improve, right? These kind of questions are asked to make, the next sprint better. So we can liken lessons learned to this particular project, to this process rather. So some of the sessions in lessons learned could maybe include a review of maybe our activities as a BA, right? Or maybe the deliverables. So this business case now that I wrote, now that I have prepared, what did I do well in this business case, right? What did I not do well when I was writing it? What can I do to improve, right? So lessons learned can be used in any aspect, right? You could use it to know maybe the impact of a particular project on an organizational process. So with lessons learned, you can get to know if maybe the way we carried out this project, if it was fair or if it was good. So with it, you can note positive or negative variances per se. So acceptance criteria. I know when most of us were learning acceptance criteria, I think we mostly learned the Gherkin. That's the one that has to do with giving, when, then, right? So acceptance criteria is basically a BA technique that is used to define conditions that must be met for a product or service to be deemed acceptable. We have two ways of writing it. We have the Gherkin model and we have the test-driven development. So with Gherkin, right, it's actually a language that is used to write acceptance criteria in a structured format, right? And it uses sets of keywords such as given, when, then, and, but, right? So we use these keywords to describe the behavior of a particular system in a clear and concise manner. So for example, now, you have a particular user story and you want to write the acceptance criteria in Gherkin, right? So you'd say something like, maybe as a customer, I want to be able to add items to my cart so that I can purchase them later. Now, if you're writing the acceptance criteria for it with Gherkin, it would be like this. Given that I am on the product page, when I click on the add to cart button, then the item should be added to my cart and the cart icon should update to show the number of items in my cart. That is how you write the Gherkin, right? With TDD, it also involves writing automated tests before writing the code, right? So if you're writing the AC, that's acceptance criteria in TDD, you're going to define the behavior of the system in a specific scenario, right? And it helps and ensures that the code meets the requirements and behaves as expected. And it can also help you in catching errors early. So for this particular one, I think I have a PDF. I'll share my screen with that one. I have a PDF that I'm going to share. So that's the last, but I felt like I need to share that particular one so that we'll have an idea of what the TDD looks like. Let me see. Let me see if I can. Let me stop sharing and share this last one. And that would be all because it's already 8:59. Okay, so this is, let me see if it's showing. Okay, so this is an example, right? So I wrote this user story and acceptance criteria for an Australian company. So this is it, right? So context, made.it is just basically a startup that connects makers to customers. Makers, that's what they call tailors makers anyways. So you're connecting tailors to the people who need them, right? So it's already a website that is running, right? They just want to add certain features. So I will share this PDF in our group chat on WhatsApp actually, but this is just for example. Now this is the user story, right? The feature for this one is the ability to automatically notify matching makers about potential jobs, right? You want to notify the tailors about potential jobs. So the user story for this would be that as a maker, I want to be able to turn on an alert for jobs on the website so that I can be notified of jobs from any time, the past 24 hours, and the past week. If you're writing acceptance criteria for this using the TDD, you're just going to basically list out various scenarios. One, verify that the alert button shows green when turned on. Verify that the system displays the text. This job alert is turned on when maker turns on job alert. Verify that the alert button shows blue when turned off. So you're basically writing out various scenarios, right? I got to know of this TDD when I had a particular interview. Apparently, I only knew the Gherkin model. And luckily for me, I came across this TDD about 15 minutes to that interview, right? I was on YouTube, I was just watching some BA videos and everything. And then this person talked about the TDD model for writing acceptance criteria. And I was like, what is it, right? So while I didn't fully understand it, at least I wasn't totally blank when they asked me about the TDD, because they told me that Gherkin is more of a higher level than the TDD. So the TDD breaks it down to a lower level structure, right? So guys, I would end it here. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, I would take them now.
Thank you so much, Millicent. Thank you so much. That was an awesome time. And so we are going to open the floor now for anyone who has questions. It seems Vivian has question. I think she has question. Please, if you have question, kindly unmute yourself and ask your question. Or you can as well drop it in the chat box, and Millicent can just monitor the chat box so that you can take the questions one after the other.
All right. Okay. Let me see. I'm going to the chat. You're welcome, guys. So who identifies the items? Is it the BA or the team be the ones to identify the issues why the BA itemizes them? Okay. So you're talking about item tracking. So it could be anybody, basically, right? When you're talking about the identification. It could be that, okay, maybe during one of your daily stand-ups, someone identifies a particular problem, and then you get to start the session for this item tracking. It could be anybody. It's not limited to one person. Let me see. Who determines the attendees, participants, members of the group, the BA or the client? I am guessing that you are referring to focus groups. Chidike, am I correct?
Yes, you're correct. I'm referring to the focus group.
Okay. So focus group, this is where we come in as BAs. We have to ask questions. Right? So you need to know the context of that particular focus group. What do we want to achieve with that focus group? Then you will now be able to say, okay, these are the certain people that we would need. You can ask your project manager. You are not restricted from asking questions. So you just have to ask them and note them. They might even give you a list of people that they're expecting or that we need for the focus group, right? So you're not going to be alone. You would have help. So let me see. Does that answer your question, Chidike?
Yes, it does.
Okay, okay. Let me see. Mm, okay. Who determines the attendees? Okay, yeah. Okay, she asked me that before. Okay, so could you please go over the TDD method again? Okay, I think I would share my screen again for that. There's no problem. I know I kind of rushed the TDD. Honestly, it was a last minute stuff. I just felt like I should share it. Okay, so um this TDD, I only recently got a more in-depth understanding of it from my mentor. I do have a mentor, a BA mentor in the US. She was the one who helped me when I was trying to put this up. So she said sometimes we get to mistake the TDD. It's okay, I'm not muted. We get to mistake the TDD for the typical UAT process, that's user acceptance testing. You're basically outlining every single scenario you can think of within that user story. Let's use this one that I, okay, or maybe let me see if I can go to one that's, okay, this one now, this feature, notify makers of potential jobs on the website. Now the user story is, as a maker, I want to be notified on the website that a potential job matches my selected preferences. Here you now need to say, verify, this is the scenario you're looking at, right? As a maker now, right, you're now putting yourself in the maker's shoes. What do you need to see, right? When I need to be notified on that website, right, of potential job notifications, right? I need to also verify the color of job notifications to show blue. For example, LinkedIn, for example, now, or maybe your notifications, if you open your notifications on LinkedIn, you would see the number of notifications down. I don't know if I'm correct. Yes, if you have notifications, it's going to show you number of notifications and it's going to show red, right? To show that you have not seen with the number, let's say 2 or 3, and it's going to show red to show that you have not clicked it. Once you click on it and you exit, yeah, and you come out, it is gray. It's no more showing that. So you're thinking from, you have to think as if you're the particular person using that product, right? So what will I want to see? You're listing out various scenarios. That's just, I don't know if that helps, but that's how you're doing it. I'll still send, like I said, okay, this one is longer. Let me see if I can read this one out. As a customer, this is to locate tailors nearby, right? As a customer, I want to be able to see makers who are at least a mile away from my location so that I can be able to conveniently access them during fittings, right? Now it's for the TDD. This is how you're going to start. Verify. Now, remember, we said that TDD helps you so that it will be easier for them to, for the developers to write code for that particular test, right? So now it's easier for this developer to read it and understand your acceptance criteria. You're breaking it down. This is down to a lower level, right? You're not saying given when I, no, you're not doing that. So now you're going to list it out this way. Verify that the customer sees a pop-up on their screen requesting for access to live location during job posting. Verify that the customer's accurate location is displayed under profile after permission has been granted, right? And I also wrote down assumptions anyways, because I was told to write down assumptions for that website since it's an existing website. So an assumption here is that both the tailors and the customers obviously include their location when they are creating an account with this particular company, right? Just like you put your location. I've forgotten this social media app that you used to put to your location. Okay, I think on Instagram you can choose to put the location of maybe where you took your picture or something, right? So this is just an example, right? So verify that the customer's location can't be seen on that profile if access to live location was denied. So if I say no, I'm not going to show I'm not going to give you access. Why would someone be able to see my location when I denied you access? I don't know if you understand. So you're just trying to break things down to a certain level. Debbie, do you understand? How the TDD method actually differs from the Gherkin. This is a lower level way of writing it. With the Gherkin is higher level, like I said, because you're using the giving method. I'm trying to see how I can make you understand that, right? With the Gherkin, you're using given that I am on, looking for example, given that I am on the login page when I enter my correct username and password. So you're just, I don't think the given method can fit into every single description when you're using the TDD. I think someone asked for the full meaning of TDD. It means test-driven development. So it will be easy for the developer to test each of these things individually, right? It will be easy for them to test each of these items now individually. So that is how it's different, because you're breaking it down to the smallest part. Debbie, do you understand? Hello? You can, okay. There's no problem. I will share this PDF anyways. So in case you're reading up or maybe you want to practice or something, you can use this one. So yeah, any more questions, please, or are we good? Any more questions? Okay, let me stop sharing my screen. Okay, I would assume we don't have any question anymore. Thank you so much, everybody. Sorry, I took 13 more minutes of your time. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you so much. Please, use and favor. Please, do you have anything to say, Mark?
Hi, Millicent. Thank you so much for spending your time with us and sharing your interview experience with us. I think that was like the cake on the. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, okay. Yeah. So I think I enjoyed the interview part because it was much more like an experience-based thing. For the API, actually, after a BA session, there's an API content on the website. In case you want to learn something on API, it's under our free courses under the website. So after the BA, I remember that when we started teaching business analysis and Petrina taught API, like everybody got discouraged. You understand? Because what happens is that our target audience are people who are new to the technology industry. So a lot of times you don't want to discourage them by introducing, too much technicalities. You understand? So I'm happy that you were able to learn from that experience and you did not get discouraged. But for every other person, we have like an API. I think I did a recording 2-3 years ago when we just started. So it's on the website. I'll try to find it and share it with you in the group. However, I believe that we can also, just learn it from YouTube. But I'm also happy about the TDD that you also shared. Like we always say, education is a never-ending process. You have to keep learning. So for the mentor aspect, if you do not have any mentor, if you want us to pair you up with mentors, or if you feel that you need, someone to, support you aside from this group, we are happy to help you. So I think I like the fact that you're proactive enough to have that. So, and I would want people to also learn from that. So thank you so much, Millicent, for sharing your time and experience with us. It was awesome. And I would like to say good night to everyone. Please ignore my babies at the background.
Thanks, Millicent. Good night, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Thank you, Millicent.
Good
Wonderful
night.
presentation. Thank you, everyone. Night.
Good night.